Greetings, everybody. It's cold outside. We drove up from Atlanta this morning. I should have brought a winter coat. We'll see if we can get through it. I am so pleased to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction. I was very surprised to see my picture on the cover of the program. Kind of makes you feel good. Those things happen. But the real deal is we come to honor and listen to Leah Penniman. She's a special lady. I'm going to tell you why I think so. First, we have to do the perfunctory stuff, read her bio. Leah Penniman is a Black Creole educator, farmer, paysan, author, and food justice activist from Soulfire Farm in Grafton, New York. She co-founded Soulfire Farm in 2010 with the mission to end racism in the food system and reclaim our ancestral connection to the land. As co-executive director, Leah is part of a team that facilitates powerful sovereignty programs, including farmer training for Black and brown people, a subsidized farm food distribution program for communities living under food apartheid. I know she's going to explain that to you. And domestic and international organizing towards equity in the food system. Leah has been farming since 1996, holds an MA in science education and a BA in environmental science and international development from Clark University, and is a Manye Queen in Bodum. The work of Leah and Soulfire Farm has been recognized by the Soros Racial Justice Fellowship, Fulbright Program, Risk 50, and the James Beard Award, among others. Her book, Farming While Black, Soulfire Farm's Practical Guide to Liberation on the Land, is a love song for the land and her people. And I think that really speaks to it. So that's the official biography. But Leah is a very special woman. I'm so proud to know her and able to salute her work and do my best to give her roses while she's still young and standing with us. One of the jokes for me, at my age, just about everybody young. I've been doing this work. First vestiges of this work, I started in 1965. We put fresh fruit and juice machines on our high school campus. That was a long time ago. I didn't know that was going to lead me to a lifetime of work in agriculture, but it began then. So what I realized, I built Truly Living Well in Atlanta, as she said, twice built the largest farm in the metropolitan area. But it got to a point where I knew it was time to step down. It's time for younger people to do this work. And that's why it is so impressive to see all of you young people in this room coming together around natural farming, pre-industrial, regenerative agriculture. I mean, that's the stuff that we have to do. And you people are the revolutionaries who have led this revolution. And we used to talk about a good food movement, local food movement, but that's no longer true. The paradigm has shifted. The world knows that the big ag doesn't work, it's broken. The big ag system is completely broken. And I got a period on the end of that paragraph when I heard an interview on NPR that the farmers up in the Midwest were complaining because they were getting the camera on their crops. They're complaining about the chemicals that are getting out in the field. I said, I know we've made great, great progress. And in any revolution, so just to be clear what I'm saying here, the paradigm is shifted. We are building a local food economy, and you people are all part of it. So that's why it's so pleasing for me to be able to stand up here, and even more pleasing to be able to introduce Leah Penniman to you folks, because she's something special. Back when I was back in the 60s and 70s, when my generation saw something we thought was good, great, outstanding, we said, that's bad. You see a nice car, that car's bad, man. And when I can stand here and say, now, Leah Penniman, she's a bad girl. She was a leader from her generation. Her work has proven it. It speaks for itself. She travels around the country, and Still, there's a lot of people who run around running their mouths, talking about what they're gonna do, or what they wanna do. They don't do nothing. They don't get it done, just running their mouth. But not Leah. Not Leah. She's an amazing young lady. I'm so proud of her. I already said that. I'll say it a lot. And what she told me when we talked on the phone this week is that after she does her work here, she got to go back and work in the greenhouse. This is that time of year. That's the kind of people I love. So, with no further ado, Leah Penniman.
Everyone. Wow. In the Krobo language of Ghana, I will say modemio to you, which means I pay homage to you, my elder. So thank you for that introduction. And thank you all for being here. This is really freaking cool. Like in high school, I got literally beat up for being a farmer. And now it's a cool thing to do in this world. So very, very exciting to be here. I'm super grateful and honored. Thank you, everyone. Before we start with the storytelling, it's customary to give thanks, and I'm going to give some triple thanks. The first always is to our ancestors, upon whose shoulders we stand. And today I feel inspired to call into the room one particular ancestor of mine. Her name is Brown Lee McCullough, and she grew up on a farm in Rock Hill, South Carolina, that was a former plantation where our ancestors were enslaved. We lost that land in the early 80s when so many black farmers were losing their land, and she made it up, a great migration, you know, first to Pittsburgh and then to Boston. But my grandmother never lost that love of the land. And I remember as a child, my very first memories of planting and harvesting were in her strawberry patch. And we would make jam together. Strawberries were still my favorite crop to grow. So I pay homage to Brown Lee McCullough. And I invite you to think in this moment of an ancestor who's dear to you. And we are going to call their names into the space, loud and proud, at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Shake. That was beautiful. I also want to give thanks and pay homage to both the original people of these lands, the Cherokee, as well as the original people of the lands upon which I live and work. Those are the lands of the Stockbridge Munsee Mohican. And I know it's common and maybe even a little trendy to stop there and just, you know, assuage our settler guilt by naming some folks. I personally believe it's also important to take action around rematriation, around native sovereignty on the terms of the people upon whose land we stand. In the case of the Stockbridge Munsee Mohican, some of the things they've asked of us include working to stop the E37 pipeline from desecrating their burial grounds in Pasquini Island, to keep their native seeds alive on the farm, and to give them a cultural respect easement for their annual ceremony. So that is what we're up to, and I hope that everyone in this room is up to some solidarity work with the people whose lands you are on. And the third and final thank you, speaking of greenhouse, is to my team, including team member in the room, Noah. We have a little weird hero industrial complex thing going on in the US of A, where people think that like Martin Luther King was the civil rights movement, or like Vandana Shiva is ecofeminism. Nobody does anything alone. You probably realize that if you've ever run a farm. So I just want to give thanks to Larissa, Cheryl, Kiani, Ria, Naima, my whole team, because, you know, while I'm up here getting to talk and my shoes are clean, you know, Justin's there shoveling gravel off of the raspberry beds, and I really appreciate that. So give thanks to my team, to all of our teams. So I love history. I'm gonna tell you a lot of history today, but first I feel like I should fill you in a little bit about why I'm even with you and why I care about this. Because, you know, like Baba Rashid mentioned, I've been farming since 1996. I totally fell head over heels in love with that elegant simplicity of seed to harvest, of like being able to do something that was undeniably good, and by extension it was possible that I was good, which is a hard thing for a teenager to believe. So Soulfire Farm is really rooted in this idea that for our people to be free, we have to participate in our own sustenance. To get free, we have to feed ourselves. And so we're on 80 acres in the snowy, much snowier than here, hills of Grafton, New York. It's like brick, it's really cold. And we grow, we're shifting what we grow. We grow a lot of perennials, so trees and bushes laden with fruits and nuts. We grow herbs, we raise sheep and ducks and mushrooms and honeybees. And all this food that we grow on these sacred lands is shared. First, it's shared with the farmer trainees who come through, so we're serving up about 10,000 plates a year that are mostly from the farm. And then it's brought to our community, the community living under food apartheid. And we happen to deliver the food in this very creepy white man, which I think is only made slightly less creepy by the cute sticker and the cute teenager who's my son, and he hates when I show the picture, but it's beautiful. We partner with 2 refugee centers as well as the Center for Law and Justice and Victory Bus Project to make sure that that food is getting to people who are impacted by incarceration and the criminalization of migration. So farming would be enough to do, right? But we got this little situation where there really aren't culturally relevant, uplifting, dignified ways to learn how to farm for Black and brown folks in the US. And so we got a lot of training programs, day-long, week-long, season-long apprenticeships. And people come from all over the country to come join in with these beautiful immersions that range from like nerdy soil science, like all the way up to how to heal from ancestral trauma. And we offer a special certificate program in 2020 in how to look fly while hanging onions. 50% off if you registered today. And then the third and final thing that we're up to is organizing. You know, even if we all know how to farm, and we got a couple cute little examples of farms, that's good. And also there are policies and systems and structures that make it very difficult for our people to access land, very difficult to access credit and capital, markets, and so forth. And in order to change that involves organizing and activism. We got projects like the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust that's working on land return and reparations for marginalized people. We got projects like working on the Green New Deal and other policies, right? Projects like the reparations map, which is bringing resources back to people. And then with our international sibling farms in Haiti, Vieques, and Ghana, I just got to go visit our sibling farm in Ghana, which was really beautiful. We're supporting the Via Campesina food sovereignty movement. So that looks like seed saving. This is a peanut seed savers collective that we sponsor and support, as well as irrigation, disaster recovery, whatever folks need, really. We're not trying to be like some kind of imperial extension agent. It's just what people need. So the thing is, getting to the history, that our ancestral grandmothers really, really knew what was up, right? Because when they were faced with the near certainty of being kidnapped and stolen from their homes because they'd already watched their cousins go and their brothers and their sisters, they started an insurance policy called braiding their seeds into their hair so they'd have something with them wherever they were going, right? Believing against odds in a future of tilling and reaping on soil and believing that we, their descendants, would exist to inherit the seed. They braided the gourd seeds, the sorrel, the basil, the rice, the kola nut, the melon, the black-eyed pea, sesame, and cotton seed. And seeded not just this physical genetic material, but also a whole lot of hope and a whole lot of memory into us, their descendants. And I want to talk a little bit about that brilliance, because I don't know about y'all, but when I started getting into farming in the 90s, I went to like all the conferences. I was at the Northeast Organic Farming Conference, the Sustainable Ag Working Group. I went to all the things. I read all the books. Like anything by New Society or Chelsea Green, I read it. And there was a commonality. And the commonality was that the people put up as experts were white men. Like 99, 100%. And so I just figured either like white people just came up with everything worthwhile, or like I just chose the wrong team and I need to go figure out something else to do besides farming. Neither of those things are true, thank goodness. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, Black folks' contribution and leadership contribution to the things we think about as sustainable and regenerative ag. But I'm curious, if you could raise your hand and put up how many fingers correspond to the number of African farming practices you use on your farm or garden. And if you don't know, you can just be like, I don't know. Like if you use 1, if you use 2, 5, 10, no, I don't cheat. 10, 3, 4, 2, okay. There's even clues up here. These are like categories. Like maybe you use a black soil testing protocol, or maybe you use like a black bed prep protocol, so forth. All right, fear not, I'm gonna give you the answer, so don't even worry about it. So to start out, talking about Black agrarianism, what I have in my left hand here is the soil, topsoil, that we encountered when we signed White Man's Papers in 2006 for the 80 acres that would become Soul Fire Farm. In my right hand is last summer's topsoil, right? All the neighbors down the hill who could afford the river bottom soil were like, you can't farm in Grafton, you crazy, what you talking about? But the thing is that our ancestors knew how to, and know how to, farm the marginal hillsides, farm the swampy lands, farm the dry lands, and it's by using those techniques that we're able to revive and recover our soils. Here's an example. Does anyone here compost with worms or encourage worms to grow on their farm? Okay. So we can thank Leah Penniman for that, the OG vermicomposter. Back in 50 BCE, she put out a decree that said that anybody who harmed an earthworm would be put to death. Now, mind you, I don't really believe in the state putting its citizens to death. And I think it's pretty amazing that she recognized the importance of the earthworm in ensuring the fertility of the empire, right? And she had a whole cadre of priests whose full-time work was dedicated to the study of the habits of the earthworm and the protection of the earthworm. In 1949, USDA scientists went down and took like soil cores in that area and found that the castings during her reign were 10 times higher than before or after because of that essential sheet composting that she was doing with the worms, right? Does anyone just do like regular old composting? Does anyone put ashes in their compost? Okay. So we can thank the women of Ghana, Nigeria, and the Niger for this super dark, rich earth called African dark earth, which is a combination of bone char, ash from cooking fires, crop residues, palm oil and soap residues, and scraps from the kitchen. You combine it in just the right mixture, you get a nice pyrogenic carbon that traps fertility and is very porous. It's the main fertilizer that women are using in their vegetable and fruit gardens and orchards. And what I love about it, even more than the science, is that there is a moral obligation for every generation to contribute to the layers of this African dark earth, such that you can count the layers as you would the rings of a tree to see how many generations old a community is. And in communities where I visit, I was able to see 700 years worth of layers of this African dark earth. So give thanks to Black farmers for compost. Does anyone recognize this picture? What is it? Slash and burn. Slash and burn. Yeah, I majored in environmental science. That's what they told me too. And I was like, those backward people don't know how, right? That's what they teach you. What I didn't realize is that this is Swidden agriculture, which is the original fallow integrated crop rotation. I'll explain that. So essentially the forest, right, is like an amazing cover crop in an agricultural system, right? Tree roots run down super deep, they pull minerals up from the subsoil, they drop their leaves on top, they provide organic matter, they moderate the climate, they capture water. If you burn a portion of the forest to plant in, you liberate those nutrients and use them, move on to a new area. If your rotation is 20 to 30 years before you get back to the same spot, what grows in the meantime? Another forest, right? That's the original crop rotation. It captures 10 times more carbon than it releases, right? It's a very sustainable system. But when colonizers come and steal the land away from people and push them onto smaller and smaller and smaller parcels, 30 years becomes 20, 20 becomes 10, 10 becomes 5, 5 becomes 2, and then you have a system that's no longer sustainable, right? But if you have enough land and people don't take away your land, you can use this crop rotation system. Anyone ever heard of permaculture before? Anyone know that permaculture is a little bit of a dirty word? Nothing against the technology, but unfortunately what happened, and what often happens, is that somebody decides to like pick and choose a whole bunch of different indigenous technologies from all around the world, like clump them together, erase their history, rebrand them, and sell them for only $4,000 for your permaculture certification, right? And who benefits and who gets the royalties? Not the indigenous people who originated that. So one of the supposed permaculture technologies is polycultures, these agroforestry intercrops or tree guilds, right? Where you have a nice big fruit or nut tree and it's surrounded by all of these perennial herbs that both attract pollinators, repel rodents, mine the soil for phosphorus. You know, you've heard all this stuff before. There are over 26 different examples of this in Nigeria alone, right? Not to mention all around the world. And in Haiti, what we call those polycultures is jardin la cour, which simply means house garden. And the fact that it translates as house garden tells you how commonplace it is to do that kind of intercrop. This is our Jardin la Cour nursery in Léogâne in Haiti, where residents of the community can pick up seedlings to renovate and expand their house gardens. At our farm in New York, unfortunately, we can't borrow from that same nursery because lemon trees won't grow, moringa won't grow, mango won't grow. So this is our version of the Jardin la Cour. It's apple trees, apricots, plums, surrounded by mints and lemon balm and chives and 20 other herbs. But this picture shows another technology, which actually co-originated among two different indigenous groups. Does anyone know what it's called when you have those like staircases? Terraces or terrazas, right? Which is a Turtle Island indigenous technology, Mesoamerica, right? It also evolved at the same time in what is now Kenya, and the word for terrace in Kiswahili is fanyaju. Fanyaju means throw it upwards, because when soil erodes down the hill, you've got to dig it and throw it back up, and then make these terraces to prevent further erosion. So we quite literally fanyaju this, because when we got the lands, it was so eroded and overgrazed and overlogged that like there's a stone wall at the bottom of the field, and the soil was up to the top of the stone wall on the upslope, and it was like 4 feet down on the downslope, right? So we had to throw it up. Does anyone do transplanting? Okay. So transplanting, again, first documented amongst two different groups of indigenous people in the Chinampas in what is now central Mexico. And also among the Wolof and Mende people who are rice growers in West Africa. And they would have these, like a nursery, you know, you gotta take care of your little precious babies and give them lots of extra TLC and love and water and protection from the pests. And then once they're grown big enough, like 4 true leaves, you know, you move them out into the field. And that's how rice was grown and is grown. And that's the technology that slavers from the Carolinas specifically sought out and stole Mende and Wolof people from their homelands to establish the rice fields here in the US. Anyone do rotational grazing of their livestock where you like move them to different places? Okay. The oldest documented livestock for all of humanity is the guinea fowl, which is a very loud, very annoying, but cute bird from Central Africa. The chicken is a distant relative. The chicken didn't originate in Africa, but chickens and black folks do have a very close relationship, mainly because under the Virginia codes, black people were not allowed to raise other livestock. So the Virginia codes prevented African people from having cows, sheep, ducks, turkeys, pigs, right? But they didn't think it worthy of mentioning chickens. It's just sort of a non-thing. And so black folks raised a lot of chickens. In fact, a number of presidents, there's like logs of dozens and dozens of eggs and meat purchased from the enslaved Africans and their compounds. So a lot of the varieties that we have, the housing techniques, the strategies for raising these birds come from black farmers, so we give thanks. Anyone here do raised beds? Why?
Drainage.
Drainage, why else?
Water retention.
Water retention.
Microclimates.
Microclimates.
Extend the season.
Extend the season. Easier to bend over. So one of the first documented places where raised beds were used and are used is among the Ovambo people in Namibia. You can see that these yam mounds are one type of raised bed. They have some neem leaves in it to repel nematodes as well. But the Ovambo also do beds that are like 10 feet long, 5 feet wide, you know, with the ditches dug to channelize the water and termite ash on top and cattle urine and muck from the swamps and so forth. And when the colonial government tried to get them to leave their raised beds behind, we're like, we have this other land for you over here. They're like, you know how many generations it took for us? And they resisted. They had an armed resistance to save their soil that they had invested in. So we give thanks to Black farmers for raised beds. Anyone ever had a work party at your farm? Invite your friends over? It's called the Dokwe in the Dahomey region. It's called Kombit in Haiti. It's essentially the idea, right? And this is brilliant because it always hasn't been, and still isn't in most places in the world, that wages define relationship to labor, that labor can be purchased. So Dokwes are actually societies of mutual aid. And so you're gonna come over to my house on Saturday and plant some beans, right? And then next week, we're going to your house to plant the beans. The third week, yours, and then the fourth week, yours. And then our harvest is also staggered. Whoever is hosting the work party provides the soup, and if it's a particularly challenging task, the brass band. That would be expected. So you have to, if you're cutting cane or something, there's gonna be a brass band at your kombi, and you better show up because it's a contractual, right, obligation. So we give thanks to Black farmers for the work party. Anyone bank at a credit union? Me too. Try not to do the banks if I can. Credit unions come out of African women's lending societies called susus, and by many other names, but the most trusted elder woman in the community is the susuma. And she's the one who holds the money, and so everyone puts in their set amount, right? We just started another susu when I was in Ghana, all women led because the other one was full. Beautiful. But then you get the money for your market stall. You get the money to thatch your roof. You get the money for the new cow, like whatever it is that you need. And you know, I had thought with my education privilege and King's English and light skin and all this stuff, I'm very aware of my privileges, that I could get a bank loan to start Soul Fire Farm. They hung up on me. Every bank I called, they hung up on me. I was like, we used a susu to fund the opening of our farm. So thank God we still have those institutions, right? I know y'all use a hoe, right? Hoeing is my favorite thing to do on the hoe. So the hoe is, yes. The hoe is the oldest, most versatile farming tool. It can be used in the dry lands, the wetlands, the up, the down. You can plant with it, you can harvest with it. If you only have one tool, you need a hoe. And not those like little Home Depot flimsy ones. Like when you go to Ghana or you go to Haiti or anywhere else where they like really farm by hands, you gotta get those big like 8-pound blades and then stuff a few into your oversized luggage and then have fun with TSA. I always do. I'm like, no, you don't understand. These blades are for the good of the people. So we give thanks for our tools to Black farmers, right? Does anyone know how old that tomato is, or you want to guess? What do you think? It's exactly 6 months old. How did you know that? That tomato is 6 months old. It's been sitting in sifted ash for 6 months in Burundi. And this gentleman is demonstrating the firmness and tastiness of this tomato, right? And I put this here to show that many of our food preservation techniques, like fermentation, drying, salting, and root cellar techniques like burying in sand or ash, have many indigenous origins, including Central African indigenous origins. Anyone ever call their extension agent to like get some advice about something? It can go well or not, I know. We tend to get really good advice about like lawns, but not about sick chickens, and I don't understand how they allocate their resources. But anyway, I highly recommend, if you're a science nerd like me, to read Thomas Campbell's The Movable Schoolhouse Goes to the Negro Farmer. It's about the first ever extension agency, which came out of Tuskegee University, Black ag institution. And, you know, they were noticing what we notice. It's hard for folks of limited means to get to the university to find out the latest and greatest in farming. And so the university needs to come to the people. So they started out with just a mule and a cart. And their strategy was that they would go find like the most busted farm in the county and invite everybody over and do like an extreme farm makeover. So they would like fix the fences, they would nurse the livestock back to health, they would prune the trees, plant cover crops, all these things, and that would become the demonstration site for the county, and then they'd move on to the next county and do another extreme farm makeover. Eventually they got a little grant for this car, which you see them proudly standing by. So we give thanks to Black folks for extension. Y'all know who this is, right?
Yeah.
Who's that?
George Washington Carver.
Dr. Carver, yes. We just had Black History Month. I mean, every month is Black History Month, but the official one. And you probably, if you went to your kid's elementary school, there was like Dr. Carver with like a peanut next to him. Because there was 1,000 peanut inventions. But a lot of people don't know why he was so into the peanut. What family is it in? Legumes. Legumes are the best friend makers of the whole plant kingdom. Right? They have this uncanny ability to talk to bacteria and tell them, you know, I made a little house in my roots just for you. I filled it with sugar. I made it cozy. All you gotta do, rhizobial bacteria, is move in and breathe in that atmospheric nitrogen, put it in an organic form so that I can soak it up. Right? And that's why we have nitrogen in our soils, like full stop. So he's observing that the monocropped cotton soils of the South are highly depleted, highly degraded. This is not going well. And convinces in the late 1800s and early 1900s, mind you, a whole generation and a half before Rodale, to get all these farmers to go organic. So they're doing cover cropping, they are doing mucking out the swamps and making compost piles, they're doing heavy mulches, they're even doing silvopasture of their pigs in the oak forest. Right? Does that sound like anything? Like the latest craze? But this is like 1890s, 1910s. And so he's widely considered the father of the modern regenerative agriculture movement. Another Tuskegee professor? Who's that? Who's that? Wiley. Anyone ever heard of Farm to Table? Please. So Wiley, mid-1900s, is recognizing that you know, wholesale just is not going to cut it for our folks. We're getting discriminated against by the middleman. They're taking a high cut. We're not accessing the markets. And so instead of like competing at that game, what he encouraged Black farmers to do was figure out this direct marketing thing. Because he had this whole wacky idea that city folks, they just kind of miss the country. Like, not enough to really do work in the country, but like, they want to feel connected. So if your farm has a newsletter, and you name your animals, and you give everybody a membership, and they get discounted wholesale rates on the food, and get this, they can even come out to the farm, and they can pick their own vegetables and fruits, and pay you, the farmer, for that privilege. So he called this clientele membership club, and it was the precursor to what we now call the CSA, as well as Pick Your Own, as well as Farm to Table, anything direct marketing. Booker T. Whatley was definitely an early thinker in all of that. Who's this? Fannie Lou Hamer. There's so many things to say about Mama Fannie Lou Hamer. One of my favorite things that she ever said was, if you have 400 quarts of greens and gumbo soup canned for the winter, nobody can push you around or tell you what to say or do. But she wasn't just talk, she was some serious action. I actually got to meet a brother who worked with her as a lawyer back in the 60s to set up Freedom Farm Co-op, and the behind the scenes stories are pretty amazing. So I'll tell you the story. Essentially, what was going on all throughout the 60s and even before that is when Black folks were trying to register to vote, the plantation owners, where they were sharecropping, would kick them out of their homes, out of their jobs, as punishment for the audacity, right, to register to vote. So Mama Hamer, among others, was trying to figure out what to do and set up Freedom Farm Co-op as a safe haven. But before that, it was a little bit of a legal trouble of figuring out how to do this. How do you do like communal land ownership in a way where you can still get FEMA emergency money? So she had all these Howard University lawyers come to try to help her. And they were like, I don't know, Miss Hamer, like, we can't figure out how to do this paperwork. And she was like, you get your black ass back to Howard University and study, and don't come back here until you know how to do my paperwork. So So this was told to me by one of those lawyers, and he's like, so we just locked ourselves in the room and stayed all night until we figured out the co-op structure. So anyway, she had 70 families living on freedom farms, and they raised vegetables, they raised livestock, they made enough money that they could provide people scholarships, burial fees, and so forth. And she was really echoing this original yearning, right, of emancipated black folks in the 1860s who told the Union Army, we feel it's very important that we obtain homes, owning our own shelters and the ground, that we may raise fruit trees concerning which our children can say, these are ours. Y'all know these people? So, anyone ever participate in a food hub before? So food hubs are aggregations of our products, right? Say I only can harvest 10 bushels of chili peppers, but in order to get into that university market, I'm gonna need 100 bushels of chili peppers. I need to collaborate with y'all, right, in order to get my crop into that bigger market. And so Dorothy and Philip Barker started one of the very first food hubs in this country. It was called the church share. Because how food hubs started is in the black church, the farmers would bring their extra watermelons, their extra pumpkins, put it all in a truck and bring it up to another church in Chicago that was like the Great Migration Train, and then they would distribute it. And that expanded and expanded to the point where food hubs are a major force in the local food movement today. Has anyone ever benefited from a free lunch or free breakfast program in the schools? Me too. Hopefully you all benefited if you didn't eat it, because we all benefit when our children are well. But the free breakfast program was just an idea on paper until the Black Panther Party actualized it. They were feeding 20,000 children free breakfast in Oakland every single day. Wow. They were also bringing elders to their appointments, driving folks to visit loved ones who were incarcerated as political prisoners. They were running free grocery stores, providing medical care, right? All of these survival programs, which are essential in the food system loop. We can give thanks to the Black Panthers for modeling how you get it done. Anyone ever heard of a land trust before? Anyone live on land trust land? Couple folks? All right, the first ever community land trust. We can thank black farmers for that. New communities. This is Shirley and Charles Sherrod and 500 other organizers who were involved, again, responding to the fact that sharecroppers were being kicked off their land for the audacity to register to vote, needed their own land. So they purchased 5,700 acres in Albany, Georgia in 1969, right? They set up the farm, the housing, the schools. The backlash was pretty swift and severe against them. The white supremacists came for them. They lost their land. It's a long story. You should watch the Arc of Justice documentary. But they actually won a settlement in court and were able to start over and purchase land again, which is profound. They just celebrated 50 years. I had the privilege of going down for the celebration last year. Incredible, powerful elders. First Land Trust. So this contribution by black farmers is pretty close to my heart because it impacted my child. When I was living in Worcester, Massachusetts is when my firstborn came along, Deshima, 2003. And, you know, like a good earth-loving mama, I was bringing my baby with me everywhere, to the gardens, to the playgrounds, and we ran a bunch of urban farms at that time. And I took Deshima to her one-year appointment, and she had lead poisoning, blood lead poisoning, not from her house, but from the soil. Nobody was talking about that at that point, you know, like no one warned us anything about it. So obviously we did what we needed to do to take care of her, but also I'm like, what about all the other 100,000 children in this city? So we went around and soil tested every garden, every playground. The Environmental Protection Agency's safe limit for lead is 400 ppms. We found 11,000 parts per million in some of these gardens, which is like super fun sight. Like you're supposed to be swooping in with big machines and like taking the whole soil away. Luckily, one of the seeds that came in the hair of our ancestors is the seed of the pelargonium or the scented geranium, which is a hyper-accumulator of lead and arsenic. And we remediated acres of soil using this African flower to restore those areas to health, and places where that couldn't be restored because the levels were too high. We did barriers and, you know, raised beds. This is our group of toxic soil busters. That's what they name themselves. It's a youth-owned cooperative business that gets contracts with the city of Worcester and now other cities to clean up their lead. They're super amazing teenagers. And perhaps the most important technology to me that we can thank Black farmers for, bringing over in their braids, is the spiritual technologies. As I mentioned, I just came back from Ghana, where I've been several times, studying farming and spirituality, and my teachers there are the Queen Mothers, who are everything. I mean, they take care of the trees, they take care of the orphans, they take care of people's conflicts, they remember the history, they do your wedding, they do your birth, all the things, right? So they like to interrogate me about how strange we are over here in the US, and one of the interrogations went something like this. It was like, Amide, which is my name. Is it true that in the United States, like a farmer puts a seed in the ground and they don't pray, or dance, or sing, or pour libation, or even say thank you to the earth? And then they expect that seed to come up? Yeah. Said, that's why you're all sick. You're all sick because you treat the earth like a commodity and not a relative. So here we are looking a little bit the fool, but we gotta dance, right? We gotta pray, we gotta sing, we gotta give thanks. And it carries on. This is an old history, right? It isn't like our ancestors did some stuff back in the 1600s and now we're just sitting around, right? There are so many powerful leaders in this room, so many powerful leaders outside of this room. So when people tell you like, oh, Black folks don't want to farm, they don't know how to farm, they don't have the work ethic, like, tell me about Baba Malik, tell me about Mama Karen, tell me about Brother Cook, Sister Cook, Katrina Baxter, Gail Myers, and on and on and on and on and on, right? So the question that I have is, if we've done so much around farming and food justice, why are we flourishing in the sense of, why is it that Black farmers comprise about 1.5% of farm managers, farm owners, decision makers in this country? And I'm going to put forth that there's 5 basic things getting in our way, and that they're all human created and they can all be undone, right? The first thing that's getting in the way of the flourishing of Black agrarianism is the fact that the entire food system is built on stolen land, right? Land stolen by the original people, the indigenous first peoples of Turtle Island. And that's not over. That's not over, that continues. I mean, even if just pay attention to what's going on in Canada right now, pay attention to what's going on with the Oneida right now, pay attention to Standing Rock, pay attention to Bear Mountain, all of this. And it started back in 1455 when Pope Nicholas, you know, put out a decree to all the white Christians that said, go forth, enslave, colonize, pillage, and take the land of non-white, non-Christians, who, by the way, aren't fully human, right? And that became part of US property law. Y'all ever heard of like finders, keepers, losers, weepers? That's the nickname for the 1823 McIntosh Supreme Court case that said that indigenous people lose their sovereignty as soon as a white person puts down a flag. The finders, keepers law. The Supreme Court's upheld that dozens of times, most recently in 2005 against the United Nations, who was suing New York for unceded territories. Justice Bader Ginsburg handed down the majority opinion that they had no standing over those lands because the flag was put down, right? That wasn't the only theft. It's been baked into state law and federal law for many generations that Black and brown people just weren't even allowed to own land. But then when a lot of land was being stolen and given away, like the Homestead Act, it was stolen from Native people, given to white people. The only way Black folks could get it is if they conscripted to kill indigenous people and the Buffalo Soldiers, then they could get a little land, right? So always pitting people against each other. When Black farmers did manage to purchase 16 million acres by 1910, almost all of that was stolen away. First by the Ku Klux Klan and the White Caps, who made a point of stringing up people and burning down their houses if they were so audacious as to get off the sharecropping debt trap, right? Quite literally driving them off their land and stealing it away. That was 4,000 people who lost their land that way. And then we have The federal government gets involved with that too and starts denying loans, crop assistance, and crop allotments to black farmers, leading to even more decline. So that's why we have this situation. This graph right here, that green, that's white farmland ownership in the US, 98%. That little sliver, that's what the rest of us all share in this country. Kissinger said the one who controls the food controls the people. The second thing that's preventing our flourishing is the fact that labor is also stolen to build the whole food system. We all know about slavery. We all know that 12.5 million people survived the journey. At least 2 million people perished in the Atlantic, and these were agricultural experts who were stolen, not just strong backs, not just strong biceps, right? Stolen to build the $10 trillion of agricultural wealth in this country. But after emancipation, it just took another form, right? Convict leasing. That's when you make up some BS new laws that make it illegal to exist while black. No loitering, that means don't sit around, right? No vagrancy, that means don't be unemployed. No truancy, that means not going to school, right? What are black kids getting picked up for today? All the same thing. So the prisons fill with African American people on these fake crimes, and then they're leased back to the plantation and the railroad, so much so that Alabama made 73% of its state budget by leasing black people to plantations in the late 1800s. Not a blip on history. And then as the Great Migration picked up and there was a labor shortage, the US said, well, who can we exploit now? How can we create war and climate chaos and unfair trade agreements, right? And conditions so onerous for indigenous people outside of our borders that they'll cross over those dangerous borders into a hostile territory to do labor that most white Americans won't do for any amount of money because it's so backbreaking and dangerous, right? And that's how 85% of the labor is done, by migrant guest workers in this country. Yet only 2.5% of farms are controlled, right, by the Latine population, who makes up the majority of the workforce. And that's baked into law too. Our major labor laws, the Fair Labor Standards Act and the National Labor Relations Act, just point blank exclude farm workers. They're just not included. So farm workers don't have federal protections under the law. Would someone be willing to read this quote? Can you be loud?
Yeah, I can be loud.
The white man preoccupied with the abstractions of the economic exploitation and ownership of the land necessarily has lived on the country as a destructive force, an ecological catastrophe, because he assigned the hand labor, and in that the possibility of intimate knowledge of the land to a people he considered racially inferior, and thus debasing labor. He destroyed the possibility of meaningful contact with the earth. He was literally blinded by his oh my God. I'm gonna let y'all have that one. And prejudices, because he did not know the land. It was inevitable that he would squander its natural bounty, deplete its richness, corrupt and pollute it, or destroy it altogether. The history of a white man's use of the earth in America is a scandal. Wendell Berry.
So, Baba Wendell Berry is actually coming out with another book that's all about race in America, which you wouldn't expect. He's known for the earth writing. But this is so powerful to me because oftentimes, like I've been in a lot of these national conversations about the Green New Deal, and my white folks be like, well, first we gotta deal with the environment, and then we can deal with black and brown people, as if it's not the same issue. And I feel like this so eloquently explains the intertwining of how if a people distances themselves from the earth, sees the earth as other, and assigns others to deal with the other, how that amplifies this oppression, which is dual and interconnected. So that's why it's no surprise when we get to the third major barrier is the destruction of the earth herself, through industrial agriculture. It's the #1 driver of climate change, the #1 driver of water withdrawals, the #1 driver of biodiversity loss, habitat conversions, right? We gotta fix farming if we're gonna survive on this planet, and if our non-human siblings are gonna survive and thrive on this planet. And again, we have the seeds that were braided into our hair. We know how to do it, but those methods are either ignored or appropriated in these niche corners, right, of society. How many people, when they're hungry or sick, are really excited to go out and farm? How about how many people, when they're hungry or sick, are really excited to go out and participate in civic life? Yeah, me neither. So food apartheid, the use of food as a weapon, is a strategic move. It's not an accident that in this nation right now, your zip code is the #1 determiner of your life expectancy. And your zip code is in turn determined by your race. And that's because of a whole history of redlining, housing discrimination, zoning codes that prevent the intermixing of inharmonious racial groups. In fact, even the town that we're in Grafton, was a sundown town. That means up through the mid-60s, if you had melanin, you'd be shot after dark. And a lot of the deeds of lands that we were looking at still had clauses in them that said you could only sell to a white person. And the lawyers would be looking at this, and the lawyers would just be like, oh, we're just supposed to cross that off. Yeah, so black and brown folks are more likely to experience heart disease, to experience kidney failure, right? And not because we don't know how to eat or we need some willpower or something. It's because if you live in a certain zip code, you're gonna have a KFC, you're gonna have like the corner store, you got a few dollars in your pocket, you're not gonna have that nice stuff out there, right? You get some Takis and like blue-colored Gatorade, or that's what you got. And to be well, to feel strong, to feel good in our bodies is essential for us to be able to run our own businesses, grow our own food, live our own lives. And the fifth thing, and this is really an internal conversation amongst the black communities, we got some trauma to deal with, right? I can't even tell you how many young folks who are generations away from the South even, generations from sharecropping, they come out to the farm and their first thought is like, are y'all slaves? Like, y'all picking cotton, right? There's that association, this inherited trauma that comes with so many centuries of land-based oppression. And my farmer friend, Chris Bolden Newsom, would say the land was the scene of the crime, right? And I would add, but she wasn't the criminal. In fact, she's probably why we survived. And so there's a whole lot of work we have to do to reach back across, right, 500 plus years of land-based oppression and reclaim the thousands of years of noble, dignified connection to land as part of our healing, as part of our homecoming. Because the earth, she misses us a lot. Like, she's always telling me, she's like, bring more people. So, there's always got to be like a what you can do, because now everyone's depressed. But I think that anything that people can create, especially the things they create for just a few hundred years out of the thousands of years we've been here, can be undone. And I'm very, very hopeful that we're going to be able to show respect for the Black agrarian tradition and carry on that legacy of the seed braids. And it's pretty simple how to do it. I'll give you a pop quiz. If I wanted to know how to stop Islamophobia in the community, who are the experts who I should be listening to? The Muslim community, right. If I want to know how to deal with the fact that veterans are not getting appropriate health benefits, who are the experts who I should listen to about what needs to be done? The veterans. If I want to end racism and anti-blackness in the food system, who are the experts? Black people, black farmers, right? But sometimes people get mad confused. Well, they be thinking like, I know what they need, right? They need to know how to make kale salad. What are we gonna do? I'm gonna write myself a grant. I'm gonna go into your schools. I'm gonna do kale salad after school programs, and then pay myself to do that because I decided what you need, right? That's not, nobody asked. I don't like kale salad. I don't know. I'm like, why don't you cook it? No shade on kale. You can make kale. All shade. So it's actually pretty simple. There are many, many, many amazing black farmers and black-led farming organizations that need resources. We're talking about organizations that don't even have like a website. They don't have pay staff, they don't have their own land, right? They're leasing land. And so we need to figure out as a community what kind of time we have, money, land, connections, platform, power, right? To give over. That's it, just give it. And we spent some time over the past several years interviewing hundreds of Black farmers and Black farming organizations about what they need to change in society and wrote it all down. So if you're real concrete and like spreadsheety like me, you can like be like, there's 200 things to choose from. And then choose one, right? And we always challenge folks, I know y'all are very active in here, but for folks who aren't, 10 hours a year. Give 10 hours a year towards Black food and land sovereignty, or that equivalent of your paycheck if you have more money than time, right? And I feel like everybody could maybe do that. Because we need to be asking ourselves, what seed are we planting? If we're doing nothing, we're complicit. Can't be neutral on a moving train, right? So I encourage you to definitely check that out online. There's also a list of many, many organizations you can support, as well as, of course, those right in your community that are on the list. So I want to close before we get to the panel with a translation of one of my favorite poems by Pablo Neruda. He wrote, "Pardon me if when I want to tell the story of my life, it's the land I talk about. This is the land. It grows in your blood and you grow. If it dies in your blood, you die out." Thanks so much.